So, Bob, I have a bunch of emails here, and let's answer them. What do you say, Bob?
Let's answer them.
Anonymous patron, they write in and say, disorganized attachment, is it equivalent to freeze, as in fight or flight, freeze or appease? It occurred to me that other people may experience my preoccupied attachment style as fight, avoidant as flight, and by implication, disorganized as freeze. I say this completely recognizing Bob's idea of being caught between bases at risk of being tagged. Did you use that analogy before, Bob?
Maybe. I don't know.
What do you think that means to you or to them?
I think it means you don't have a strategy.
Yeah. Tell me more.
I don't attack, so I can't run to second. I can't go back to first, which I guess is
running away.
Run away. So I'm kind of stuck waiting to get tagged in the middle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and what they're saying is if you run towards second, you'll get tagged.
Yeah.
If you run back to first, you'll get tagged.
Right.
So you just sort of freeze. Because you don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Is that what it feels like?
I think that's, yeah. Yeah, I remember a time I was standing in my dining room. We were in the middle of, I don't even know, some kind of conflict.
With your wife?
Yeah, with Colleen, yeah. And I was just felt like stunned and just looking at the table and sort of aware of everything going on around me and aware that I'm completely unresponsive right now and sort of, just checked out emotionally and...
not quite dissociating.
No, not
in
quite.
The clinical sense. But.
Yeah. So, and then I remember another time, same thing happened. And what I did is I went to my freezer and I got a Flexi ice pack out, shoved it on my face and held my breath for 30 seconds because it's a way to help your body calm down.
Oh.
And it was a game changer.
Yeah.
Like I sort of...
You teach that in your DBT?
Yeah.
Say that again?
So what you do is you get a bag of frozen corn or a Flexi ice pack, or you can get a bowl and fill it with ice water. It's big enough to fit your face. And you hold your breath and you dunk your face in the ice water, or you take the frozen corn and you hold your breath and you get it over your eyelids and it's cold and wet and it activates the body's dive reflex, which is, the world record for holding your breath is like 13 minutes. It's unbelievable. But what happens is when mammals dive underwater, their bodies aren't getting air, so they want to survive, and so they slow everything down. All the metabolism just slows down. Everything slows down, and then you can conserve energy and survive longer. And this
plays into a lot of people's attestation to cold showers or cold swims, that kind of thing.
That kind of thing.
Huh.
The one caution is if you have a cardiac problem, you shouldn't do it.
Yeah. What constitutes a cardiac problem? Like your doctor says.
Your doctor says you have a heart problem, or you have a heart problem.
Yeah.
You should not do it, or you should talk to whoever your medical person is.
Yeah.
Before you do it, so that because it slows your heart rate fast, and for folks with cardiac problems, that can induce a heart attack.
Is it in your teaching? Do you talk about the parasympathetic nervous system?
I don't know a whole lot about that, but I talk about it enough to highlight that that's what's happening.
Yeah.
Is it's turning on.
And could you just do this prophylactically, so to speak? Like,
yeah,
I think I might be a little stressed out right now.
Yeah.
Go to the freezer.
Yep.
So you put it on your eyes.
You got to get your eyes.
Got to get your eyeballs.
Your eyeballs. Yeah. Now you don't have to have your eyes open, but you got to get your lids cold and wet.
Your lids.
Yeah, your eyelids. Your eyes will be like
cold
that.
And wet.
Cold and wet. Yeah, cold and wet. And, condensation.
Waterboarding yourself, kind of. That's interesting, because that's a thing. Cold compress, right? People swear by, to try to reduce the bags. I wonder if they're getting a secondary benefit that they don't register.
They used to wrap people in cold, wet sheets in the...
insane asylums.
Insane asylums.
Right.
Yeah.
Huh.
And they use it in pediatric, in ERs for when babies come in because they have some kind of thing. They'll actually take a baggie full of ice water and they'll just gently roll it over the kid's face and get their eyes and their nose to help the child settle. Yeah.
Is it something, because I'm thinking, well, that might be kind of nice, just once a day, just sort of take a minute, do that.
Yeah, why not? I've noticed that the effect lasts about 10, 15 minutes, but it's a reflex. You can do it as much as you want, and it doesn't wear out.
Doesn't wear out.
I know a story about a guy who got through medical school with a bowl of ice water next to his desk. Every time he was freaking out about how much he had to learn, he'd just shove his face in, towel off, and get back to the books.
That visual makes me laugh.
I know.
Just like, you know, he's at his desk, and all of a sudden he thinks, oh shit, I got a quiz, and then dunk, you know, splash, head down. That's pretty funny. That's great. Yeah. So going on with their email.
Right.
Does this help in any way with distinguishing disorganized from preoccupied and avoidant? Meaning that disorganized is freeze, preoccupied is fight, and avoidant is flight. Perhaps moving between the two without occupying one middle ground of being simply disorganized in the sense of both at once confused. So what do you think in terms of the fight, flight, freeze? You know,
I don't know that there's any clinical whatever, but I've had that thought many times that.
Oh, you have?
That what I do when I freeze is I'm just locked in the. Yeah.
What about when people exhibit preoccupied? Do you think, does that fit with fight?
Yeah.
That
fit. As
I agree with you, Bob, and Anonymous Patron, that it might be a helpful analogy. However, I would say it's not a direct correlation all the time.
No.
I mean, disorganized people can certainly fight and flight. Preoccupied people can freeze. Certainly avoidant people can fight sometimes. It's not like avoidant people never fight.
It can be very fighty.
So I think as a overall I don't know, heuristic or something, I think it's fine. But the general idea is good in that tying attachment reactivity to our fear response is true. We know that's, you know, and evolutionary wise, that's the most compelling model for me, is that when we were non-social creatures, we had a fight, flight, freeze, appease, faint response for survival that was, you know, evolved into us. We're an isolated, I don't know what was in between lizards and mammals, whatever that thing was, and it's not very social animal living in a hole somewhere, and a snake comes out of nowhere. You either fight or flight, or, you know, or faint to say, you know, because fainting, the idea is we evolved that to trick predators into thinking we're dead, and they don't like to eat dead things. They want to eat live things. You know, dead things, it kicks in an instinct for them, like it could be rotten carrion of some kind, and of course it's not true. It just flopped in front of you, but it like tricks the predator because they're not very smart, and or you're so still that they can't see you because you're not shivering in a bush somewhere and alerting the predator to where you're at.
They track on movement,
right? And so we evolved that, and then when we became social creatures, ever so slowly, you know, over millennia, millions of years, we co-opted that physical danger system to our social danger system. That when we needed to, you know, those people who confused, shall we say, or associated is a better word, social distance or rejection or ostracization, those people who associated that with actual danger, like falling off a cliff or being eaten by a leopard, survived longer because dependency and interdependency and helping each other out and physical proximity and all the goodies that come from our attachment lifestyle as humans and as social primates would be facilitated. And so when we are in a fight with someone, particularly if we have relational traumas in the past, that system kicks in. The same system that would kick in if a leopard were chasing you and you felt like you had no way out. You know, you're in a tight corner and there's nowhere to run. An instinct for you would be to freeze. Just be like, if I just stay still, nothing, they'll just go away. And you might even say, I need to run, and you can't, you know, frozen with fear, this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
When your spouse is giving signals that they don't like you and they're going to reject you and they're emotionally distant or something, the same exact physiological process happens, right?
Right.
So
the body treats it like life and death.
Right. And the pain and the fear and all that is, it's been co-opted. As we were evolving, we just adopted that whole useful system, but applied it to social life, which makes our social life both glorious and terrifying, similar to a leopard that's about to eat us.
I like this recognition because when people have a failure in empathy, they don't understand the other. They could actually learn something like to the body, this is life and death, And so when we get dismissive of our partner, if you come to this idea that my partner's body's in fight or flight and they're treating this like life and death, imagine that. Imagine recognizing that in a partner and what it would do to your sense of care and empathy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And people shame themselves primarily.
Right.
And,
right.
I don't know what the big deal is. I get so reactive.
Right.
It's like, well, we evolved that way.
Yeah.
Yell at evolution if you want someone to blame.
It's Darwin's fault.
Yeah. Anonymous annual patron says, my therapist said I could have borderline personality disorder. I could do borderline personality disorder work with another therapist and that we would take a break. To my understanding, there are therapists out there who won't take in borderline personality disorder clients because of the amount of work it can come with and the countertransference. Assuming I do have borderline personality disorder, is it wise to disclose this when interviewing one of my future therapists? Are there any questions that both of you would suggest me asking while I look for a new therapist? For the record, this is a hard situation to adjust to, but my therapist isn't here to defend themselves or offer their perspective. This is all very recent, and I do wish them the best, my therapist. They also said they would gladly refer me to one of their colleagues, and I may take them up on that. End of email. Bob, what do you think?
Well, I don't know. I guess here's what I think. Therapists have a prejudice against borderline personality disorder, and so the diagnosis itself can set somebody's fight or flight response off, even if this is what they do for a living. And
right, even though they literally get paid to help people with their psychological problems. But
yeah, right.
But,
right.
I'm clearly biased.
Yeah, we could be frustrated about that. So you do have the possibility of talking about it clinically, or you could also talk about it, empirically, like, here's what happens for me, or here's why I'm in therapy. So you could think about, if you wanted to, well, when they say borderline personality disorder, what the hell are they talking about? You can look up the criteria, there are 9 of them, and think about how each one relates to you. Like, oh, okay, what's the idealization of the other, right? That's one of the things, right? And a devaluation of self. If that's true for you, you could talk about how that happens in, your relationship with your mother or whatever. Or, you could talk about symptoms of borderline personality disorder without ever talking about borderline personality disorder. You could do that but I don't like the idea that you have to tiptoe around it simply because some therapist has a prejudice against. Probably good to get that card on the table right off the bat, because if they do, then they're not your person anyways.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Anonymous annual patron, tell your next therapist, I have borderline personality disorder. If it scares them away, then good effing riddance. Now, it's fine if people have tried and they're like, yeah, it's just not really my thing. For me, for example, I don't treat people with eating disorders anymore. I used to. So I recognize that sometimes it's a professional choice that you make. And I've talked about this before, but the reason why I don't treat people I used to specialize in people with eating disorders. I had, 10%, 20% of my clients were in, on some spectrum, and probably half of them had full blown eating disorders, and they're pretty involved. It's pretty involved. It's not like having minor anxiety or minor depression, or even just depression, and that's why eventually I stopped not only not specializing, but also not accepting clients with eating disorders, because it was so involved. To be a good enough therapist for someone who is, has moderate to severe eating disorder, you have to coordinate with doctors and parents or significant others or and dietitians and friends. Maybe you have to have whole or maybe even a day treatment center, inpatient treatment center. There's so many things that you have to do to be an effective treatment team to someone with an eating disorder that I at some point just said I'm at the point in my career where I did it for a while, maybe 10 years, and then I said I want to focus on other kinds of clients, I guess. So there are, myself included, but my anger is that so many people will accept clients that they don't want to work with, and then midstream say, "Oh, I don't work with that," and I'm like, okay, but you need to tell them that before you engage. You need to screen them. And as a clinician, you have to understand that not everyone knows they have borderline, so you have to screen them knowing that they don't even know they have borderline. You can't say, do you have borderline? You just have to have other ways of screening people. And there are ways of screening. There are measures, symptom measures that you could give that would probably triangulate to a borderline future diagnosis. There's certain personality disorder screeners that you can give someone and say, I really need you to answer these honestly, because there are certain things that I don't treat. And so I need you to be, real clear. So there's that. And the other thing is that those people who specialize in borderline are more than happy, to work like myself. If someone said to me, I want to work with you, I have borderline, I'd be like, well, you're at the right person, because I've treated a lot of people with borderline. I've spent a lot of time thinking about how to do that. And then the other thing you ask is, are there any questions that you would suggest? What would you say, Bob?
Some folks with borderline personality disorder have trouble with suicide and self-harm impulses. I'd want to find out what is the therapist's general responsiveness outside of the clinical hour. Some therapists make themselves available, others do not. If you're a person that has suicide crisis, probably not going to take place during therapy hours. You're going to want to know how much you can count on your therapist to be around for you or to support you through it. Should that happen? I'll have to think about it some more. I don't know. That's all I got to say right this second. I'll just keep thinking about it.
Yeah. I would just ask, how do you treat borderline? And if the answer seems inviting, then I would go for it. Mm-hmm. The other thing I'll say is it's a crime that clients have to search so long and hard and might still, because, we tell this patron, find a specialist. There's a chance they won't even be able to find one. Mm-hmm. Or at least a competent specialist. And it's a crime that we put people in that position. Like, there are ways around this, when you have something wrong with your foot, there are foot doctors. You don't have to call every doctor in town hoping that, one, someone will specialize in feet, and two, that when they say they specialize in feet, they actually do competently specialize in feet. You just bank I trust the medical system, and so I assume if they call themselves a foot specialist, then they are. Barring some anomalies, but in our field, there's a chance that this person will never be able to find someone that can effectively, even though they're out there. Those people are out there. Mm-hmm. So it's just ridiculous, and I attribute it to this culture of not wanting to work with technology and not wanting, because there's a technological, and many people I've even had people on the podcast who have who have started to launch these things. It would not be that hard to create a national database of literally every single therapist, regardless of where they're working, and a sort of Wikipedia format to their specialties and their trainings, and if they're available to take clients. It would be simple. You could even say the government could pay for it, and you wouldn't even have to pay for it as a provider or any. it would not be hard. And yet, and there are, you know, isolated movements, but to this point, we only have Psychology Today, which is a magazine. Our best database for our industry is a freaking magazine full of incredibly pseudoscientific articles, by the way. And it costs every practitioner like, I think $30 a month or something, which is absurd. Like that, it's not worth. I mean, it's worth because you can get clients, but the amount of money Psychology Today spends on that, you know, service has got to be pennies per person. So $30 does not match what Psychology Today is spending on it, you know? Anyway, so it's just a really sad kind of situation that I feel bad for people. Go ahead.
Well, if the person is looking for dialectical behavior therapy, you could go to Linehan Institute. They certify DBT people, so that's a possibility, and chances are you'll find somebody there. The folks that's a pretty rigorous certification process. And another possibility is a organization called Behavioral Tech. They train people in DBT, so they may know people in your area that even if they're not certified, they have some at least some training.
Yeah, that's a great idea. DBT therapists, at the very least, are going to be able to tackle a good portion of what might be helpful to you. Or they also will be the sort of therapist me and Bob are, where we can provide relational, ongoing, long-term therapy for corrective experiences, and or they'll know someone that does that. So that's a great idea. The other thing here that the patron says at the end is, for the record, this is a hard situation to adjust to, but my therapist isn't here to defend themselves or offer their perspective. I'm quite positive the patron said that because they knew that I was going to go off on the therapist, and they're being preemptively protective of them, which I get, you know, totally. And again, I think we try to say that every time, you know, they're not here. If they were here, maybe there would be some kind of, but when you hear this story over and over again, I've seen colleagues who will do this kind of thing. They'll just be like, oh yeah, you know, she's got borderline. It'll be a year and a half in. It'll be like, oh yeah, she's totally borderline and she's black and whiting me right now. And so I've got to fire her because this is ridiculous. And I mean, I'm maybe exaggerating a little bit, but it's that kind of thing. And I'm like, why did you become a therapist? You know, did you think that all your clients were going to be like walks in the park? Like, did no one alert you to the fact that some clients are going to actually have psychological issues? I just don't understand, you know? The ER doctor doesn't go like, whoa, gunshot wound? That's too much for me. Get out of this hospital. You know, it's this attitude of, this is inconvenient to me. And I don't, you know, do you think the ER doctor doesn't recognize the inconvenience? You know, they were probably taking a break and now there's a gunshot wound showing up in their, you know, emergency room. They're inconvenienced. And yes, it's going to be hard. And, you know, they might have to actually work and they might have some feelings about it. They might be kind of, there might be a lot of blood. It might be kind of scary. They might even risk getting sued because if they mess it up, right? If someone could die. ER doctors don't turn around and walk the other way. Having said that, I turn around and walk the other way when it comes to eating disorders, not because they displease me, but because I did not want to spend 5 to 10 hours with every single one of my clients the way that I used to, you know, every week. The way I just couldn't afford that kind of work, you know what I mean? And so you know, I see both sides, I guess. Anyway, let's take a break. Let's reset so I can get out of this funk, Bob. And when we return, more emails. What do you say? All right, we're back from the break. Annual patron Patrick from Portland, Oregon says, I am preoccupied with low self-esteem. My therapist is focusing on EMDR and DBT. The focus on mindfulness really helped me at first, but I feel like I'm hitting a wall. Is this the right therapy focus for me? My mom died when I was 18 months, and I struggle with low self-esteem and preoccupied in my relationships. I really feel like I need to dive deeper into my childhood and open doors to some of the injuries I suffered as a child. But my current therapist focuses mostly on breathing and mindfulness, which I appreciate, but I am wondering, should I be focusing more on talking through my past? Bob, what do you think?
I don't know if you should talk through your past. Maybe. It sounds like that's what you want to do, though. So you got something to talk about, your frustration with how therapy's going. That's always a good thing to talk about when it's there. If I'm hearing right, and I might be getting this wrong, what I hear you describing, though, is that you use some mindfulness practices as a distractor from whatever the present moment is. And I believe in distraction. I think that definitely has a place. But as mindfulness, as I understand it, is about going within to actually learn to accept and work with what is. And so the thing, I don't know if you need to talk about your past. It might be interesting and it might be worthwhile, but I wonder what's happening in the present when you find yourself focused on the past. What happens for you, like in the middle of a session, say, when you want to talk about your mom or listen to me, when you want to talk about your past, just the thought that just occurred to me is maybe you really wish to be seen and heard. I don't know. But I don't have anything more to say. Okay, I'm not doing so well today, am I?
No, I get it. There's a repertoire, podcasting wise, to wrapping things up because it's such a weird communicative space.
Yeah.
Because in conversation, there are certain routines, certain signals, like I'm at the end of my thought now, and then the other person picks up. In podcasting, there's this whole other thing where you have to literally, I do this sometimes. I'll be like, and that's all I have to say about that. You know, it sounds kind of funny, but it reminds me of Little Big Man. Do you remember that movie?
Oh, I love that film.
Yeah, with Dustin Hoffman.
Yeah.
And the Indian chief, American Indian chief, would frequently, if I remember right, he would end. Do you remember what he would say?
I don't remember.
I think it was that movie. At the end, and it was just a hilarious character. I just remember, I remember I'd watch that movie with my family, and I remember my dad in particular thought that chief was so funny. Like that moment where he's like, you know, I forget what he calls Little Big Man, or he calls him Little Big Man, Dustin Hoffman, and Little Big Man, I'm about to die, so you need to bring me to where we lay my ancestors at the top of the hill. And Dustin Hoffman is like, oh, but I don't want you to die. He's like, it is my time. You must bring me to the top. They get to the top of the mountain and lays him down, and they have this long talk, and he's like, okay, it is now my time to die. And he closes his eyes and his face is at the sky, and then all of a sudden it starts raining. And Dustin Hoffman is like, oh my God, he died. And then he starts to flinch with the raindrops, and the old man sits up and says, I guess it's not my time to die. Let's go back down to the bottom of the mountain, and I don't know. He delivers it. The actor delivers it, and Dustin Hoffman as well, but mainly the guy, the American Indian. Yeah. He delivers it with just such a comedic, deadpan, just hilariousness. Right. Anyway, what was I? Why did I even bring that up?
So podcast repertoire, how to move on to the...
Right. So I think he would say something at the end of his statements. He'd say like, and that is what I have to say about that.
Right.
It's sort of like when Mandalorian. Did you watch Mandalorian?
Yeah.
That character played by, what's his face? The guy that rode that thing, and you'd say... And that's how, anyway, my point is that in podcasting...
Oh, yeah, I remember that guy. Yeah.
He said something, and that is what I have to say about that.
Right, yeah.
And that is all I have to say about that.
Yeah.
That kind of, anyway. What I'll say about that, Patrick from Portland, is that EMDR is great, DBT is great, mindfulness is great, and there are some practitioners that, that's all they want to do, or that's all they think is going to help. And for you, Patrick, you're like, I want to talk about my childhood, and I feel like it will be helpful. And your therapist is just not oriented that way. And obviously, you can talk with them, as Bob says, and say, I want to talk about my childhood. Can we do that? And if your therapist is like, it's not really my angle, or I think these other things would be more helpful, or whatever. Or when you do talk about the past, they don't seem to be as interested or ask the questions that you want. You can certainly just try to work it out with your current therapist. But there's nothing wrong with finding an adjunct therapist, a secondary therapist, or maybe even just taking a break from your current therapist, talking to another therapist that focuses on that. There could be a lot of good things that happen. For some clients, it's not a matter of like, well, I'm going to uncover the unconscious the way that it used to be thought of. For many clients, it's grief. It's just, I've never grieved what I went through. No one ever gave me a venue to just talk about what happened to me. And I feel like I have to do that. And therapy seems like a great place to do it.
Patrick wants to talk to his therapist. That's really cool.
Yeah. Patron Trisha from Anchorage. You ever been to Alaska?
No.
I'm going this summer.
Really? You taking that ferry ride up the Inside Passage?
Is it a ferry ride? I don't know. It's a boat. I don't know if it's a ferry, but it's a boat that you sleep in, and then we're going up not to Anchorage but to Juneau, and I think I'm really looking forward to it. There's a lot of hiking and a lot of nature and stuff. Anyway, and it's funny because, we end in Juneau and then you fly back to Seattle from Juneau.
Right.
And so I'm like, well, I'm in Juneau, might as well check out the town. And so I started asking around, like, what's there to do in Juneau? And, the gestalt basically is there's nothing to do in Juneau. I mean, other than more hiking and snowshoeing or whatever. But, you think you got Anchorage, you got Juneau, and Juneau is the capital, I believe.
Yeah. So
you think, well, it's got to be like a city, and from my impression is that it's like if Juneau was in Washington, you wouldn't even know the name of Juneau because it would be that small.
That small town. Yeah.
So it just tells you the isolation that Alaska provides. Anyway, I don't even know if any of that's true. But patron Trisha from Anchorage says, is there a certification available for attachment theory? I am a pre-licensed therapist and would love to have a deeper understanding of this particular theoretical framework. Is there a certification available for attachment theory as for a therapist? Bob, what do you think?
I don't know.
Yeah, I only know of one. It is a certification in attachment focus treatment at the Attachment Focus Treatment Institute in Williamsville, New York. I can't attest to the quality of that certification process, but that's the only one that I know of. There are many trainings, though, obviously, that don't involve becoming certification. Anyone can. I could say I certify you in Kirk Honda brand therapy.
Sure.
So certification doesn't mean anything. No. It just means that an organization has developed a curriculum and has an official organization level certification process.
Which is to say they self-appoint.
Yeah. So, buyer beware.
Yeah.
But in terms of, if someone, and people often ask me this question, my trainees are like, I want to know more about attachment theory and how to use it in therapy. And I'm really intrigued. I'd first read Attachment and Psychotherapy by Wallen, and really read it like literally 50 times because it's so dense and there's so much wisdom in it. And it really reflects, for the most part, how I feel about all form of therapy using attachment in humans. Anyway, so Attachment and Psychotherapy by Wallen.
Wow, you actually recommending a book?
Yeah. It's such a great book, though. Like, sometimes I'll just pick it up and read like a paragraph and I'll be like, oh, it's just, he puts it so well and it's so thorough, So there's that, but that would just be a starting point. The path that I took is I just studied the fuck out of it, and talked about it and wrote papers about it and applied it and read more and thought about myself. My clinical ability using attachment theory, I would say 0.1% of that came from outside of me, outside in terms of like absorbing a lecture or a book even really. It came from me taking things in and then really kind of wrestling with it. I have this luxury of one podcasting about attachment theory almost every week. So that every week, and recently, so every weekend we publish a couple reruns, and occasionally I'll listen to them just to be like, what was that episode even about? And I can hear the evolution of my understanding of attachment theory. I'll listen to an episode from 5 years ago, and I had a okay grasp on it, but not like I do today. And so how did I get there? Well, I spent the time and podcasted and taught it and applied it and thought about it and read more. And, that's what I would recommend if someone wants to master something.
Well, since they're probably in supervision, how about an attachment-based supervisor?
Right. Anonymous patron, she says, "Hey, Kirk, I appreciated your response to my email about my daughter. I spent this past summer with my mom, and oof, it brought up a lot, LOL. I bought 2 copies of the Attachment Theory book by Annie Chen and sent her one before I got there, sent one to my mom before I hung out with my mom. But my mom never looked at it. We got into a lot of arguments, and she eventually asked why I couldn't forgive her and why I was so full of anger at her. It was hard for me to stay calm in that conversation, but I did try to explain why her neglect and parentification of me as her little confidant amid her abusive romantic relationships had been so hurtful. It was like talking to a 5-year-old, though. I want us to be close, but her willful ignorance is infuriating. I feel guilty because she really doesn't understand, and it is akin to being angry at a child. I suggested we go to therapy together, but she refused. I guess the short answer would be for me to explore this in therapy. But in the meantime, I'm unsure whether it's helpful or harmful to her to explain why I'm hurt. It seems to just send her into despair, and I end up comforting her. And we're just replaying that pattern that I can't stand of parentification. And I get to feel superior and self-righteous and identify with the abuser, but I'm ultimately unfulfilled. Bob, what do you think?
Yeah, right. Well,
because you've been down this road with your dad before he died.
No, when I was 20,
the desire to, don't let you put experiences in your head, but
sure.
But this feeling of that the anonymous patron is talking about is my mom mistreated me.
Yeah.
And I'm still connected with her.
Right.
And I want her to understand what she put me through.
Right.
But she always decompensates, and then I end up having to take care of her.
Right.
And I'm in this loop,
Yeah, definitely in the loop.
And I'm chasing something.
Definitely chasing.
So can you relate to that at all?
Yeah, I gave it up.
What was it like when you were chasing? What were you doing?
I would seek my parents' approval by dropping little information bombs on them, and often feeling disappointed by their response.
Like, hey, I graduated from Antioch University and I got a master's degree and I'm doing pretty good. It's my job. People respect me and think I'm a good therapist. ... And then they would say what?
My dad would generally turn a conversation around and talk about himself, either directly or just sort of trying to, like the listener who relates. He'd be like that. I was thinking about the listener who relates, and I think they're not listening at all. They're talking.
Well, they can be. We've talked about this before. You're a listener. What do they say? Waits. And there are listeners who relate.
Right.
And obviously a listener who relates can be narcissistic and not really listening.
Yeah.
But I think that listeners who relate can also be absolutely listening, and it's just how they listen is by relating. Because I'm a listener who relates. I'm kind of both, but I'm definitely a listener who relates. And when I have other people who also are listeners who relate, then like Berto is a listener who relates. I think he's also narcissistic. He would say he's narcissistic, but that's not a good example. There's some other people in my life who listen by relating, and I noticed that we absolutely do feel heard. Even though we're not, even though we're sharing our own lives, both of us, you know what I mean? So But you're saying that your dad would listen by relating in a narcissistic way because, I mean, so he's not really listening by relating. He's just waiting for an opportunity to talk about himself.
My view of that is skewed by my frustration. I think the point I want to make is I gave up trying to have that kind of relationship. So I gave up the urge to have repair because I didn't see it going anywhere.
Right. Well, I don't get to that, but I'm curious, for if you're willing to talk about it.
Yeah, no, let's keep going.
Anonymous patron's sake, you're in that zone where you're still hoping.
Yep.
What was that hope? What were you hoping for?
I don't know if I could have articulated it.
This is in your 20s?
Yeah. An apology, acknowledgement, to a sense that he cares.
Cares about what he did to you?
Yeah. And its impact. His attention, his genuine attention, or what would have felt to me like his genuine attention. Because my dad is a good man. He's not like a,
psychopath.
No. But he's limited by the things that happen to him, just like I'm limited by the things that happen to me. Though I'd say the difference between him and me is I've had an education in this sort of thing.
And decades of therapy.
And he doesn't have that. He could have done that, but that's not the path that he wanted to take or the path that he ended up taking. So,
so you're hoping for acknowledgement, for an apology, for him being proud of you.
Yeah, I think I did want him to be proud of me. And, I suspect he probably was proud of me, but not in a way that I experienced.
In a celebratory way, you wanted him to celebrate you.
Yeah.
Outwardly.
Yeah, I think I would have liked, his interest in me. I don't know what my sibs would say, but lately I've been thinking about him, and I don't think he liked me very much. We were oil and water, I think. Now, my sibs I could imagine my brother, if he were on the podcast here, perhaps raising an objection to that, but I don't really know.
Yeah.
I don't really know.
I mean, I think sometimes it's more likely when someone says that once we investigate that it felt that way, but not that was like a fundamental choice that your father made at some point. Like, I don't like my son Bob.
Yeah, it's probably true. It's probably not that, but probably there was a chasm between us, and probably greater so when I gave up this person's talking about the script that they find themselves falling into. I gave that up.
Yeah. And the script, so prior to giving it up, are you saying it was a lot of appeasing, a lot of pleading, a lot of accommodating? Yeah,
definitely. I don't know that I ever didn't accommodate him, but I did. I live here. He lived in Philadelphia, and so there's 3,000 miles between us. So our relationship really
got a lot of contact.
Smaller.
So what prompted you to give up?
It's like you go to the water so many times go to the well so many times there ain't no water. Stop going to the well.
But the trauma for a lot of people, like I think for the anonymous patron, is, but I need that water. I have to believe. I can't accept the idea that it's not there because that's too demoralizing. It's too depressing. How did you deal with that?
Well, I think the main way that I dealt with that is I made another family. I got my Seattle family here, and they're like the family you choose.
There's another well.
Yeah.
Was it hard to make that transition? Because it's a quote unquote giving up.
For me, living 3,000 miles away is sort of like, what else was I going to do? So no, I wouldn't say that was a hard transition. I'm thinking about, though, the way in which my attachment style and insecurities shows up in my Seattle family, like how I behave in such a way, and still in an insecure way that I still don't talk about. Like I think I probably do a lot of the same things, though the people here don't have the same responses as, the experiences I had when I was living in my dad's house, my mom and dad's house. So that's a probably significant difference. Certainly there's no abuse happening
Right.
here. So that stuff doesn't get triggered.
I think what you're saying is your chosen family isn't without its strife regarding issues and even generating from you. But but the reaction from your chosen family isn't anything like what your dad would have done.
No, not like that at all. And so the things that happen, I don't have nearly the same level of just frustration or conflict with my Seattle family that I did with my grown-up family.
How would one know, because I'm guessing a lot of listeners are in this boat, if the well is actually dry? Because we could imagine a situation where it's like, well, maybe you could turn him around. Maybe you could get him to acknowledge you, because
I did try.
But how could someone detect that if they're in the middle of this situation? How are you saying, like, look, if you've beat your head against the wall for a number of years, you probably should just move on?
We'll give up that. I'm not saying to give up the relationship, you do that or not, but give up looking for water in that well.
Yeah. Right. I don't know if I've ever... I don't know if I agree that it's always hopeless.
I'm not saying it's hopeless.
Yeah.
And it would be hubris for me to suggest what that person should do. I can only talk about what I did.
Yeah.
And I remember one key moment in my early 20s when I wrote him a letter and basically told him, this is what you did. And this is its impact on me, and I'm really upset. And he wrote back, it was really fascinating, actually. I still have it. He wrote back, he had taken the letter I wrote him, and he had, if I remember right, he had cut it into strips and wrote little responses to each bit.
Oh.
And what I remember about his response was, he said, well, I can acknowledge that the things that you wrote in your letter here are factually true. I don't know what you want me to do. Which, on the one hand is sort of like, how the hell would you not? But on the other hand, I didn't actually tell him what I wanted him to do. I don't think I had thought about what I wanted him to do.
I mean, that's a lot more acknowledgement than I thought you were going to tell me what happened.
What happened months later, that was when I was finishing up college, and then I was visiting him after I got done school. I think the summer after I was out of school, and we were in the kitchen, and he said, "Are we okay?" That's a high demand question. And what I said to him is, I still get really angry with you. And that's kind of where we left it. I don't think we never tried to talk about that, any of that again. I don't think my sibs talked to him about any of that.
I mean, I'll tell you, what you deserved was him to hug you and say, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And say, I didn't know this, but when I read your account, it makes sense to me.
Yeah.
And I've made a lot of mistakes in my life, and these are some of them.
Yeah, I agree. I think that would be really helpful.
Yeah.
And then, beyond that, if there were room for, feelings around that to bubble up, because it's not like one apology and it's like, oh, okay, it's all better and I'm never going to get upset about any of it again.
Right.
I think if you're injured, the injury comes around again. And so I think ideally, I had a therapist a few years ago, someone I really respected. She was really cool. She told me a story. She said when her kid was 22, she had a daughter 22, she sat her down and she said, this is what I did. This is what I feel bad about. This is what I think I did that's a problem, and I'm sorry. And she told me this story. Her daughter laughed and said, Mom, no, that was okay. And then there's this other thing that actually did hurt, which is really cool. I mean, wow, what a gift.
Yeah.
And my therapist, I think, very humble, accepted the feedback that she got. I'm sure it wasn't easy. I can't imagine it was easy, and apologized. I've never heard of a parent doing that. Never. It certainly didn't happen in my family.
Why?
I think, honest to God, I think it just outmatched them. They just, for whatever reason, ego strength or whatever, they had to stay. My dad and even my mom, they had to stay in a certain script about, not unlike what
Patron.
the patron wrote in about. What they wrote in about is the thing I've noticed between my mother and my brother. My older brother Pete is just one of the loveliest people I ever met. And he at times he's still angry with my mother, and I think, understandably so, but all it does is evoke her defense. My mom has dementia now, so I don't think anybody has this conversation with her anymore. And she faces dementia actually with a great deal of humor and grace that I didn't notice in her before that, but she can't accept. She as far as I could tell, she couldn't accept any of that feedback from my brother, and it would just evoke defensiveness. I think it just outmatched her. Like it overwhelmed her, and to the degree where she couldn't let her defenses drop enough to actually hear him. And I think that source of pain and frustration for my brother Pete. I doubt he goes to that well anymore, though he's still pretty instrumental in her life and her care, and so he sees her a good amount. Especially care to me. I haven't seen her in probably 2 years, in part because of COVID, but that's not the whole story. I live out here. He sees her, and he's very patient, very supportive, not perfect, but whatever.
Do you think he's like an anonymous patron here, like going to the well?
I think he has been at times,
and taking care, and if I'm a good enough boy, she'll turn around.
I wonder how much he would do if he felt he had a choice.
Yeah.
And it's tricky with parents. I don't actually know how people do this. Like if I lived in Pennsylvania, I would be much more involved in my mother's life and in her care, but I don't know if I would choose it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a weird thing that for many of us we've never done before.
Yeah,
to take care of your parents. Yeah,
but most people's parents they're gonna age. Yeah, and decline the way the humans are.
Yeah, I mean, my parents are doing great.
Yeah,
but it's just a matter of time.
Were they in their 70s?
They're almost 80.
Yeah.
I had a client once that had this issue where massively sexually abused by her dad for 10 years. And as an adult was still was taking care of him and bathing him. And
did she have a response to that? Did that bother her?
Yeah, but and from the outside, as her therapist, I thought, and occasionally we would talk about, like, you have a choice in the matter, right? You don't have to do this, and do you want to do it was always my question, and basically implying I wouldn't be surprised if you didn't want to do this.
Want to do probably would have been tricky for her,
right?
Especially and particularly tricky if she didn't want to do it,
right? And so she was in this very overt way going back to not only a well that's empty of water, but it's full of hot lava.
Yeah.
And continually going there because of this 2-year-old compulsion to return to your caregivers. 2-year-olds don't move out to college and get away from their parents. They just keep going back.
Just go back.
And when you're that abused, you just keep going back.
Yeah.
So, I think and I think it's commensurate with how much trauma you've been through. Like the more trauma you've been through, the more you go back to the well, which is interesting to hear about you, like that you resolved to not at kind of a young age.
Yeah.
What do you think influenced that?
Young age, probably in my 30s though.
But I'd say that's,
relatively.
Yeah. Why do you think you advanced that quick?
Well, in part because I created a family here.
Right.
That's big. That's actually a really big part of it. And
therapy.
Yeah.
Being a therapist.
Yeah. Well, yeah, probably. And just the diminishment of contact. I mean, it's all phone calls, and those are fairly infrequent. My parents don't call me. They never did. My mother had a theory that was my job. She believed that of all my sibs, though. So, and I think it's really kind of interesting that the whatever her heuristic is around phone calls and what's behind it, but I don't know that she could actually talk about it. Anyways, since the ball was in my court, I don't call very much.
So just drifted away.
Yeah. So something occurred to me though about the person that wrote in. Oh, here's what it was. I never said to my dad, here's what I want. I want you to say you're sorry. And I want to know if I matter to you beyond.
Why didn't you tell him?
I never thought of it. That's why that occurred to me, is because I was reflecting on what the patron wrote in, and I wonder if it's clear to mom what daughter wants. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I don't know. What I've noticed in my DBT students when they're learning how to do assertiveness is that they're often very good at describing the events that they're to orient the other person, and they're good at expressing their feelings, and they think that the assertion of what I want is self-evident.
Yeah.
I think it's just the words I want are really vulnerable.
Right.
And so they just sort of omit it. And
yeah.
I can't tell you how many students I've moved from I would like the phrase I would like to the phrase I want, and everybody's afraid of those words.
Yeah, I also think it has to do with our pre-verbal life, that when we were 0 to 3, most of what we wanted was either intuited or communicated by circumstance. You're 6 months old, you cry because you're hungry.
Yeah.
Or you cry because you need to change your diaper or something.
Right.
And I think depending on our level of relational trauma, we still kind of are hoping for that unconsciously, that people will just know.
Just know.
And it saves us from the vulnerability.
Yeah.
Because if we're rejected but not asking, that hurts. But if we ask and get rejected, then that's like 10 times worse.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of clients, and have had a lot of clients in this situation that you're describing, where I will work with them on asking for things, and then they'll often say, well, I feel like I am. And then I say, okay, well, I'll role play it for you. And then I just say, if I were in your shoes, this is what I would say. I would say da 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 da. And it can be a little elaborate because there's a lot of twists and turns to the request. It's not just like, I want you to say you're proud of me.
Yeah.
There's a fair amount of caveats and elaboration on that request that I would say if I had the floor, if you will. And so clients will sometimes say to me, wow, like when you say it out loud, it really makes a lot of sense to me. Like it wouldn't have occurred to me to even word it that way. But when you say it that way, I realize how important it is, and it kind of validates me. And if you hadn't role played it, I don't know if I would have even known where to begin. So along those lines, Bob, if you were to say to your dad, something that, like you said, I don't think I ever said, this is what I want.
Yeah, I never did.
What would you say?
If I were talking to my dad, I would say, I want to know if you're sorry for what you did. I want to know if you ever think about it. And if you ever think about the impact that you had on me and my sibs. And I want to know if you're open to me having feelings about that, because sometimes I would want to talk about that with you. And it might be repetitive to you, but I want to know that you're going to be patient and hang in with me, even if you've heard it all before. Like, your patience and hanging in with me would be really both valuable and absolutely necessary if I were going to take any chance with you. And one of the things that's in it for you, if you decide you want to do that, is you and I get to have a relationship that has deeper connection in it. Without it, we're going to stay on the surface, which is to say, for me, I like talking to my dad about, accounting and our businesses. He was self-employed. I'm self-employed. I would have been an accountant if I hadn't chosen this career. That's a career that would have made me happy. And that's what he did his entire life. And we could talk about that stuff, and I think experience a degree of genuine connection with one another that we couldn't if we were talking about pretty much other stuff, mostly because we shared common interest. And I actually like that too. I like it if my dad could learn how to be a listener who waits, and also can just take interest in stuff that's not what he's interested in. He bit nearsighted. Anyways, that's what I would say.
What do you think he'd say?
I have no idea. I really don't.
It's interesting. So you never said that.
No.
Even though it was on your mind a lot.
I would say that back then it was, as you say, when you articulate it for your client, what you do is you distill it into words, the thing that's the unthought known, the thing I know to be true, but I haven't voiced.
And that was true for you back then. It was sort of an amorphous discomfort.
Very, very. I knew how to be angry, right? I knew how to be judgmental. Yeah, I didn't know how to do that. I knew how to be a little bit venomous, maybe a lot, I don't know. But I didn't know how to say what I actually really want. I still have a hard time with that, as you know. I often, to have it articulated for me is often
helpful.
Yeah, elucidating, because I'm a pretty smart guy, but sometimes I can't voice my insides. I just can't. I want to, and I learn. I'm probably better than I used to be, but sometimes I'm in the dark.
Because?
I just don't know how to focus on and hold on to what I want, especially in proximity with the other.
Yeah, if I was to describe that, tell me if this is right.
Sure.
It's like being, you're in the middle of a house that's on fire, and someone comes up to you and says, like, can you describe what this feels like? You're just like, choking for air.
Yeah.
You can't stop and differentiate and reflect on what's happening for you. You're inundated. You're drowning.
Yeah. I learned how to play cribbage in my late 20s, and I used to play cribbage a lot with a good friend of mine. And it was his birthday, and so I made him a cribbage board, which is a lot of drilling. It's a lot of work. And I decided, well, if I'm going to make one, I'm going to make two. One for him.
Did you use a hand drill?
No, I used a Dremel and a little drill press.
Oh, a drill press.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I was going to say.
Yeah, no, I wanted it to be reasonably straight and even, so I used a drill, but it still was very slow work.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. So I made two, and I was back visiting my family, and I brought that cribbage board with me, and the day before I left, I was teaching him how to play. And he was getting the hang of it, but it's not a game that he was going to play beyond hanging out with me for an afternoon or whatever. And I did something really weird. I said to him, you can keep my board, even though it's just going to sit and collect dust, and you'll probably won't play this game unless I'm around.
Why did you do that?
I think I did it because, like, with the way the person wrote in is, I wanted something more, and I hadn't stopped going to that well yet.
Yeah.
And I remember feeling...
trying to say a lot through something that was not communicating it.
And it felt bad, actually, giving him my board, because I really like that board. I got it back, by the way.
Yeah. Oh, after he died.
No, I know. I think I got it back years ago. And, you know, it's not something he ever noticed was gone. I just took it.
Yeah.
I think
Wow, what a symbol that is right there.
How so?
Well, that the chasm between you and him at that moment where you're, you know, in this sort of impulsive, desperate act, there's this huge meaning and
huge.
And hope, and, you know, the clouds are parting and you're like, Dad, I want you to have this, you know, and in your head, you're like, this is such a gesture. I mean, this thing I worked so hard on, I love this thing. It's a big deal. We shared this moment right now. This is like this huge thing. And he's just like, in his head, he's like, okay, thanks. And then drops it in a drawer, doesn't receive any of the intention that you have. And then you know, get on an airplane, fly back to Seattle crying.
Yeah. And feeling bad about giving up that board.
And angry that you gave it to him.
Yeah.
That son of a bitch has my homemade cribbage board.
But it was the same dynamic of I give, and I don't know if I would say he takes, but I definitely sacrifice.
Yeah.
That dynamic was old. I mostly stopped doing that. No, that's not true. That is actually not true. And I don't think I ever stopped. In conversation, I acted in exactly the same ways that I did when I was 4, even up until his passing. And
so you're editing your earlier statement that you eventually walked away from the well?
Yeah.
You never really walked away from it?
I never walked away. Yeah, that's important. I'm glad we stuck with this, because this person deserves candor. I feel really sad right now.
About you?
Yeah.
And the shit you put yourself through?
That, and also what this person goes through. I think...
the sadness of keep returning to the well.
Yeah.
Please love me. Please hear me. Please see me.
I never
Please
stopped.
Apologize. Please be proud of me.
Yeah. I never stop. I did stop, like, I wouldn't have gave him my cribbage board in the last 10 years.
So you did pull back. You only went, what would be the analogy? You went to the well, but you didn't sit there for hours, but you still went back.
Well, what I did is I spent my time feeling frustrated with the fact that there ain't no water in this well.
Oh, okay. You didn't look longingly into the well. You stood at the edge of the well angry.
Yep.
But you still went to the well.
But still standing here at the well, do I have a choice? Like that person that you mentioned that bathed their dad, I bet they didn't experience themselves as having a choice.
Right.
I didn't experience myself as having a choice either.
Right. That's kind of what I was getting to earlier, because like my experience with this is like, it is hard to just say, I'm not going to go to that well anymore.
Yeah, it is. It's really hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When from the outside, it's like, stop going to the well.
Right.
You're beating your head against the wall. Knock it off. But there's this 2-year-old desire that is ingrained. And there's no way to get away from it.
Yeah.
It's just, how do you manage it, I guess? So maybe you manage it better later on, you know?
I don't know. I still avoid my mom.
Yeah.
Like I think about her every day. I think,
really?
Oh shit, you owe her a phone call.
What do you think about?
I think, oh shit, you owe her a phone call.
Like you feel guilty?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, she left me a voicemail, and so my phone has the number 1. It says like you have one message waiting, and it's always there on my phone screen, reminding me that I haven't called her back.
How long ago did she call?
Oh, that would have been October, maybe September. So
months ago.
Months.
You haven't listened to the voicemail?
No, I never listened to them. I can't stand them.
Okay.
This one's 3 minutes long. I cannot. Oh, and then she called again after her birthday. I did try to ring her on her birthday. That was a couple weeks ago. And
what would it be like to just say, I don't really care to talk to her very often?
It would be very, very hard.
In what way?
In the way that the last time I spoke to her, I actually enjoyed talked to her for an hour, and I
Sure.
enjoyed talking to her.
But what if you're like, if someone, I don't know if this has happened to you,
Yeah.
because I could also see this be an issue, but you have someone who wants to be your friend,
Yeah.
like, and you're like, nah, I don't want to be their friend.
Yeah.
And they keep calling,
Right.
and you're just like, yeah, I'm pretty sure they're pursuing me, but nah. Has that ever happened to you?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
There's a guy I knew in college who that exact same thing happened.
And did you feel okay with that?
No.
Okay.
Terrible.
So it's
Yeah.
generalized shame.
You know how like you're good at, if I don't want to do it, I just don't.
Yeah.
I'm terrible at that.
I love saying no to things because it means I get to say yes to other things. you
That's
know?
true. That's true. Wow.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
I love saying no to things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like at work, at the university.
Yeah. Say no.
I reveled in saying, no, I'm not participating in that. I'm not going to that fucking meeting. I'm not going to be on that committee. I'm not going to do that bit of like, there's one of those mandatory sexual harassment trainings.
Oh yeah.
That I'm just going to say, even though I'm a cis hetero dude, I don't need like whatever, would I have benefited from it, and did I benefit from it 20 years ago? Sure. Yeah. There were things that I wasn't born understanding about gender dynamics at the workplace and what can be received as hurtful or worrisome to other people. And I've learned over time, but I don't need to go to some stupid 4-hour training, you know what I mean? And take a stupid test afterwards to prove, and so, and I also know that the organization doesn't think I need to do it. They just do that because of insurance reasons or, suing reasons or something. It's a lawyer thing. It's it's not like people actually, it's not like my boss thinks I need to go on that training.
Yeah. I suppose if your boss thought that, you'd have a whole nother problem.
She'd just tell me, like you got an issue or, so I didn't do it. Even though I got multiple emails saying your paycheck is going to be taken away from you or something. I'm just like, no, you're not. And no, I'm not. I'm not. There's to say yes to that means I have to say no to 10 other things I'd rather do.
Yeah, you'd rather do.
That honestly are better for society. A lot of my life is trying to help people in the world. And if I'm going to be altruistic to the world, I have to say no to this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love saying no. Last question.
Sure.
About this topic.
Yeah, right.
How do you like cribbage? I hate that game.
Oh, it's fun. A lot of math.
Is it?
Yeah, well, it's addition.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I played that game for hours. And
it's
hours
all
and
luck.
Hours.
You and I have played a lot of cards. You and I have played a lot of cards.
That's true.
We've played, obviously, poker and all the iterations. You got 7 card. You got Jaworski high-low.
Right.
You've got 5 card. Of course, you got stupid Texas Hold'em. We've played Omaha Hold'em.
Yeah.
We've played 13, which is this Southeast Asian game, which is just so fun. We've played Bloody
Spades,
Sevens and
Hearts.
All the games I just mentioned, except for Texas Hold'em, involve skill and a little bit of luck, of course. Texas Hold'em, 99% luck, by the way, in my opinion.
Well, at our level, for sure.
But even at our level, because anyway, my point is that with the other games, I feel like there's some gamemanship to it. Like, okay, what do I do here? I could win with this hand. Do I? There are options.
Sure.
With Texas Hold'em, it's like blackjack. You're stupid if you don't follow the rules. It's such a reduced game. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there are certain things to do. Yes, like
if you got a 2-5 and you stay in.
Standard. What do they call it with blackjack? Is like standard.
I don't know what they call it, but yeah, there's like if you've got 17 and they're showing a 6, like you're an idiot to take a hit.
You don't take a hit.
Yeah.
Right. And those things increase your odds up to 49%. That's the point.
Right. If you follow all the rules, you get 49% odds of winning every hand.
Which is why people who play blackjack sit at tables and get really frustrated with other people who take hits when they shouldn't.
Right. Because anyway. Yeah. So cribbage is one of those games. Like
there's a lot of that in cribbage. I hear you.
It's just like, did I get the cards that are going to help me win.
Uh-huh.
That's why I don't like that game.
Yeah, I think I played so many hours of it and had so much thought about it. There's a bit more to it. There's some
is there?
psychology to it. Yeah,
Really?
yeah,
Because you have to guess like what they're going to put down.
yeah. What if I play this? What am I looking at with that? And da 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 da. And like what are my best odds with the cards that I'm playing? Yada yada.
I don't know.
And then a lot of it is luck. I mean, like, oh, okay, you just happen to have the right card.
No.
Yeah.
It's like Baccarat. James Bond is always playing Baccarat, and I'm just thinking, you can't get any more numbskull of a game than Baccarat. It's so luck oriented. Do you know what I mean? Like you would want him to be playing poker.
Yeah.
Like he should be playing 5 card.
Yeah.
Or I guess Texas. God, I just can't.
Well,
stand
they had a Bond with Texas.
They did?
Yeah.
When?
Daniel Craig's first Bond
really?
movie.
Huh. Okay. Well, because Texas was so popular at the time.
It was.
Yeah.
And believe me,
God.
the game, it's awful to watch.
Yeah.
Like, because it's clearly
Bond, the Bond representation.
the actual card game in the movie is just awful.
Right. Meaning they didn't know what they were doing. They should have consulted with someone who knew what they were doing.
They made it so that everybody had the ideal hand. It's just the next guy over had a slightly more ideal hand than this guy,
Oh.
and the next guy over, and the next guy. So it goes from a full house to 4 of a kind to a higher 4 of a kind to a royal flush, to a straight flush to a royal flush.
And they actually got those cards.
Yeah. And everybody's on
from
one hand,
from one deck.
from one hand, from one deck.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's really
That's
bad.
literally probably never happened in the history of Texas Hold'em. You know what I mean?
Would it ever?
The odds of that happening
Yeah.
are just so astronomical.
Just ridiculous.
Yeah. That's funny. So, I think another reason why I have such a anger towards Texas Hold'em is that you and I, with all our friends, we used to play poker all the time.
Oh,
we played 3 times a week. And we played all the games I mentioned,
Yeah.
and it was so fun.
Yeah, it was
and
really
we
fun.
had a blast.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Occasionally there'd be someone get bent out of shape, but
Sure.
but it was all in good fun, and it was great. And then Texas Hold'em became
yeah.
popular.
Yeah.
And the wave of Texas Hold'em. I mean, I don't know if you remember, like a year, I don't know, maybe 2000 or something.
Yeah, that's about right.
Suddenly, like regular suburbanites were playing Texas Hold'em.
Everybody was playing Texas.
Yeah,
Hold'em.
and we would get invited to the games.
Yep.
And we would clean up because they didn't know what they were doing, But at the same time, it just felt like it just lost all
It's
of its
not fun.
Yeah. It's
Like-
just not a fun game.
It's not fun.
It's work. It's like
Yeah.
it's like the games we would play, if you lost, you would be like, it was more like, oh man.
Yeah.
Darn,
Right.
but with Texas, you lose. You just feel like you did something wrong.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what it is. I feel like when I lose at Texas, I did something wrong. Like I didn't do the thing right.
The standard.
When I
whatever.
lost in the other games of poker, I don't even think I thought about it. I just think I thought, well, what are you going to do? I made choices and that happened. How was I supposed to know
Right.
that he actually had
Right.
a 6 low, a 6-4,
Yeah.
instead of a 6-5?
Is
That
that a
I had
6-5?
a 6-5.
So,
of
of
course
course I
I went to
stayed
the
in.
end
Right.
because did I think he actually had, and he had a 6-4.
And he
That's
had the
amazing.
6-4. That's awesome.
Yeah, and but that would be the one time that happened because that was the one time we played low,
Right.
7 card low or something. And
Yeah.
but when you play Hold'em, I don't know, just
It's such a long evening. It's so boring.
yeah.
Because you're in maybe 4 hands an hour, and otherwise you're just folding,
Right.
which is just.
And
boring.
that's the right way to play.
That's the right way to play.
You're playing, and 4 games an hour, it's probably a lot.
Yeah.
Especially the way that, some of our more ancillary friends play poker because they take so freaking long. It's like, snap to it, pal.
Yeah,
like
this
we're
we
playing
could
a
be
game.
done here in an hour.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
And that's why I liked Omaha because that was so much more
Oh yeah,
random.
There's a lot
and it's a
more.
Hold'em. It's a Hold'em game, right?
It is. It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For people who don't even know poker, they're like, what are you talking
And
about?
why are you talking about it?
Let's do a couple more, Bob. Let's make this one a long one.
Let's make it a long one.
Yeah. Anonymous patron, she says, I've been in individual therapy for 6 years and in group therapy for 5.
Wow.
I completed my individual therapy, but some of my issues still persist. For example, social and performance anxiety, fear of abandonment, and dealing with impulsivity.
Oh.
The issues are not as extreme as before therapy, but I feel very sad that I will always take this with me. How do I come to terms with my quote-unquote illness and the fact that I will never be quote-unquote normal? All my life, I have been trying to be like everyone else, and now I realize this will never happen. Bob, what do you think?
Oh, well, I think you can. I am forever going to chip away at the things that are gumming up my brain. I'm just going to chip away at that. And you know what? I'll be honest with you. I just don't care. Because what I really want is to build a life worth living. And I can. I can build a life worth living. And if chipping away is the best I can do, then so be it. I don't feel hopeless about it. I don't feel sorry for myself. I don't feel like I've been ripped off just because the things that happened to me. Like, I don't look at my life and compare it to yours or anybody else's and say, oh, well, you had the good one and I had the bad one and woe is me. I think you and me talked about this a couple weeks ago. I never feel that way. I can extract joy out of this, satisfaction out of this, and I am going to chip away.
Yeah.
Well, what else would I do?
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's kind of the thing. It's like, what else are you going to do? Like, either you stay static or get worse, or you chip away at it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's two choices, you know?
And when I think about where I've been, like me and Colleen, 16 years, I didn't know anything about myself until I met myself in my relationship with her. And the things that I discovered, I never would have found out on my own, I don't think. And yet I'm very, very glad to know them. And they're not all pretty and they're not easy. And with her, I get a shot at working with them.
Did you ever reach a point where you had to face what Anonymous Patron is facing, where it's like, wait, so I'm always going to, even though I've been through therapy,
Yep.
I'm going to go,
Yep.
I'm never going to recover completely.
Yes.
When was that?
About 3.5 years ago, on an episode of Psychology in Seattle, where my good friend said to me, the best you can hope for, Bob, is probably something like preoccupied insecure attachment style.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. What a great best friend you are. No, and you know what? Actually, it was really cool because what it did is it relieved me of chasing windmill.
Yeah. Tilting at a windmill, right?
Is that what that is? Yeah.
Yeah. Don Quixote with a lance. You tilt your lance at a windmill because you think, anyway, right? Isn't that what you're referring to?
I don't know. I just know the expression, but I don't know where it comes from.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it relieved me of that. And now I get to live a life where a lot of the pressure's off. Like, I'm a little crazy. Yeah.
But before that, we talked, you still were holding out for complete recovery, or?
I didn't even think about it. I just presumed that was the mountain I were climbing.
Yeah.
And I didn't know when I was going to get there.
Right. Because, and I used to think this way too. That's a premise that's in our society and in our industry, that with enough therapy, the right therapy, and if you meaningfully participate, then there'll be this point you'll get to where you no longer have the problem.
Yeah.
And in some instances that's true. Like if you have a phobia of bridges,
that's awesome.
You can actually get to a point where you literally have no fear of bridges.
Right.
But when it comes to attachment disorganization, there's no way that you're going to rewire everything. You know, maybe if we lived to be 500 years old,
maybe
I could see that, but we don't live long enough. And I think that I realized that rather slowly with my clients and with myself. You know, I have problems, and I had this, I remember, I think it's kind of a youth idea. Maybe it's an American youth idea that like, I will, you know, work hard, and then there'll be this threshold, and I'll walk through the door and I'll be on the other side.
Yes, exactly.
You know, I think it even applies to even broader things like career. You know, I'll earn enough money, and I'll own a home, and then I can relax. You know, there's this idea that I think the American dream or something, you know, Whereas other cultures will say, like, the suffering never ends, my friend. Like, if you think that suffering ends, that creates more suffering. So knock it off. And
I say to my clients sometimes, well, good therapy is when you trade in a bad set of problems for a better set of problems.
yeah.
And that's what good therapy is. And they all look at me like, don't tell me that. But
Right. And people even write in and get angry at me about when I say stuff like this along these lines. And I get it. You know,
Yeah.
I'm the bearer of bad news, I guess. But I think I'm the liberator of beating your head against the wall and shaming yourself. You know, just accept that this is your thing. You know, for you, Bob, even the amount of, you know, the amount of awesome work that you're doing in therapy with a therapist that is perfectly designed for your disorganized attachment corrective experience.
Mm-hmm.
You have a wife that you, as a therapist, have worked a lot with explicitly on this issue.
Yeah.
And if you keep doing that, and you know, on the planet, I'm guessing there's a chance that you are the best worker on self on this issue on the planet. I mean, I never thought about that.
Yeah.
That is possible. You know what I mean? Like, given your issue, there's a possibility you are the best out of, you know, 8 billion people, and say 500 million have your issue. You're the best out of all those people because you know, given your place and culture and your age or whatever.
Well, yeah, a lot of good fortune. Yeah.
And by the time you're 85, you'll still be suffering.
Yeah.
Weekly, you know, daily even maybe. You'll have chipped away at it, and there'll be more wisdom and more forgiveness of self and others, or different patterns, maybe different coping, you know, little interrupts in your system that will derail, you know, the self-destruction. But you'll still be feeling scared of closeness, feeling distrustful of others, feeling extra hurt by little things that Colleen says or something, you know, desperation for validation of, you know, we all have this, but you have it, say, more so given your traumatic history. And so, you know, I realize that's, you know, that's depressing to some, because you've been sold a bill of goods that isn't true. I mean, we're just telling you the reality. If you want to be angry, don't be angry at us. Be angry at whoever gave you the impression that wasn't true.
Yeah, right.
We could have been telling everyone this from the beginning, you know?
Yeah.
But you've been sold a bill of goods, and I get it. I also get the grief process of like, wait, so I have to grieve a future that I always wanted. I always thought I thought if I did the work, if I went to therapy, I thought that I would achieve that. And you have to grieve that. You have to say, like, I'm never going to get that. That's sad, but I can improve and I can eke out less suffering, you know? I mean, and they knew this way back in the day, you know, psychoanalysts and object relationists would talk about how to become mature is to become slightly depressed about just how lonely life is, you know, just how truly alone we are as humans, you know, even if we're connected, we're still basically alone.
Didn't Freud say something like gallows humor is the height of maturity?
Yeah. I don't remember that, but that sounds like what he would say, right? and so it's been recognized, and of course existentialists and Buddhists have known this for centuries,
right?
And they obviously thought about it a lot, you know, they really and investigated it a lot. So
yeah, that's true. Now,
again, this doesn't mean that you can't have 5 minutes of glorious closeness with your spouse or your pet or your parents or yourself. Doesn't mean you can't have a few months of relative happiness, but it also means that you're going to get triggered and you're going to go down a road in your mind, and there's going to be some bad months, and chipping away at it is all we can do. And so, Anonymous Patron, you know, that's where I think you're at. You're like, wait. You know, you say the issues are not as extreme as they were before I was in therapy,
right?
But I feel sad that this will always be with me. You know, I'll never be quote unquote normal. And on that level, you know, there is no version of normal that people propose. I mean, Bob, can you think of a single person who doesn't have like some significant relational traumas and are on some personality disorder spectrum?
No, everybody's a little weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everyone has, I would say, significant relational and attachment injuries and defenses thereof. Like, I don't know a single person who can freely be vulnerable, can freely hear other people without being threatened, can freely be criticized maybe by their spouse without having a destructive response,
Sure.
at least initially. I don't know anyone who doesn't have a self-destructive coping mechanism. Like, everybody I know.
Yeah.
So you've also been sold a bill of goods, Honest Patron, that normal means lack of suffering. And I know it looks that way, you know, like when we're suffering and I do this when I'm driving around town and I just see people going about their day. I'm just like, fuck you for not having my problems. You look like you're happy. Fuck off. Yeah. You know, it looks that way. It is not that way. It's one of the things about being a therapist that really kind of helped me was I was like, oh, I bet you anything you look like someone on the street that looks like you've got it all together.
Right.
You don't have anything together.
Yeah.
Like, you are a wild train wreck of a mess.
There's,
you know what I mean?
Backstage.
Yeah. Like, and then I learned, oh, everyone's like that. Yeah. The most put together people who have like everything going for them, mm-hmm. the couples that look like they've got everything going for them.
Right.
No one is happy all the time.
Yeah.
No one is not self-destructing. So, at least part of the time. So that's another lie. And it doesn't anyone any good to lie in that way or believe it.
I wonder if the person that wrote in has a static view of whatever anxiety looks like it's going to look like this forever. Who knows what your relationship with anxiety is and what it's going to look like in 10 years. It'll likely be different, especially if you're a chip away or two. And
like, if we could go back 20 years for you, what would, and we were to tell you, look, this is never going to end. Like, you're always going to be suffering. What version of the future would you be distorted about?
I'm not quite sure I get the question.
Well, 5 years ago, if, you know, the prospect of, Bob, no matter how much therapy you're going to go through, the best you can do is preoccupied.
Sure.
That kind of like, and then that pain of like, shit, that's probably true. That's a bummer. The bummer is kind of partially based on a vision of the future that might be more dire than it seems.
Yeah.
So what would you tell yourself? Like, no, this is what it'll be like. What would you say?
I'd say that what you tell yourself it'll look like is far worse than what it actually is.
Like, what's an example?
That's a great question. What's an example of something I would have told myself? Oh, well, let's see. You're going to learn something. You're going to learn that you believe that you are your utility, and that's all you are. And you're going to learn how to pay attention to what you want more so, and you'll get a little bit better at it. And you'll notice that sometimes you're actually able to get what you want, and you'll like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I would also add that by releasing desire for something that'll never happen,
right?
Like, a lot of the suffering goes away.
Yes.
Not the most of it, but some of the suffering goes away. You know, just welcoming in, like, man, I got issues. And
it's actually really comforting to me to sit here and think about the things that I struggle with, and to remind myself that, of course, I struggle with that. Yeah. And that is part of what it is. And it sort of like relieves me of some of the shame and guilt that I feel for being a person of issue.
Even though you're number one in terms of awareness and recovery. I'm saying this because even you need to be reminded.
Yeah. Yeah.
You'll go.
Oh, yeah.
So where do you go? What, you're being reminded, where are you coming from? What are you emerging out of? What distorted mindset?
Oh, you mean like this last week of my life?
Mm-hmm.
Well, a lot of fighting at home. Lot of triggers lately, and I what's the question?
Well, right now you're being reminded of something that's helpful.
Yes.
And you articulated it, but
right.
What did that reminder pull you out of? What mindset?
Oh, when I think back on the last week and I feel crappy about it, in part because of the things that I contribute, and also the pain that I've been through in the last week, being reminded that I'm a person who has troubles with, relationship, is like relieving of both my disappointment and my shame.
Like it contextualizes it of just like, oh
right.
yeah, fuck it, this is who I am.
Another way to put it is, it was a week in November
of my life.
My life. And
given my ongoing issues.
And next November might not be any prize either, because it's a particularly difficult time of year.
Yeah. For you and Colleen.
For me and Colleen, yeah.
And it's not, so I think this, I don't know what you want to get into, Bob, because we've talked about it off the air, but
sure.
I imagine, and I've been there too, of just like, you're in the midst of it. Maybe the midst lasts a month, but you're in the midst.
Right.
And it just feels like, no. This time it's different.
Yeah.
When in reality, it's not different.
It's the same.
It's the same.
Yeah.
You've been through it before. It doesn't mean you have to put up with it. It doesn't mean you have to stay in the relationship, but it does contextualize it of, there's really nothing special about this horrible feeling you're feeling. It's, you're a special, unique, wonderful person, but there's nothing particular about this. It's just that thing again.
Yeah. It's that thing again.
And that is comforting to you?
Yeah.
How so?
Well, recognizing it's that thing again gives a person a little bit of wiggle room from it. Like the other day, that thing again started to get the better of both of us. And I stopped our conversation before it got...
You differentiate from the thing.
Yeah.
You're outside the thing.
Right.
The thing isn't me.
Right.
The thing's over there.
Yeah, this thing is actually happening to you and me right now, as opposed to you and me are having a conversation like where we actually have something we need to exchange, some kind of exchange between us. Actually, no, this is just the thing.
Right.
And it took about 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Of us both accepting that it's happening.
Almost like the thing isn't real. It's something that you believe. And if it's like believing in Santa Claus, the more you believe in it, like the movies, they always like, we need to get people to believe in Santa Claus.
Right.
And I'm always like, well, how did people fall out of belief with Santa Claus if he's coming down the chimney and magically giving you gifts? How did anyone not believe? And if you can do that, then you could probably, anyway, point is that if you believe in the problem as being what it's telling you, it's just like, you're doomed, you're a terrible person, the other person is a terrible person. Then it becomes that, and it kind of perpetuates it, right? Because you end up operating from that place. Whereas if you're like, oh no, this is just a thing. It's a thing, and it's suffering, and we're triggering, but it's a thing that is inevitable to some extent. And it happens. You know? Like, it's a part of life. It's like the weather, it's rain. Sometimes it rains, sometimes it's sunny, and no sense like crying yourself to sleep every night because it's raining. It's like, just clouds come and it rains.
It's the rain.
Is that, I don't know if I'm describing it.
No. Yeah, that's true. The idea that the thing itself actually wants me to believe in it. The thing itself actually does. It loves itself, and it wants to keep itself going. And there's the whole, anger, shame thing that goes along with it. And it's just a thing. Yeah. It's just a thing. It's fucking compelling when it happens.
Yeah.
It's still a thing. I was in the middle of it last Tuesday. It was really bad, and it happened to coincide with when I had my own personal counseling. And it only took about 10 minutes for my body to calm enough and for me to remember something that made me feel soft towards Colleen.
Yeah.
And that's really useful. And that's one of the best things I get out of going to personal counseling is that kind of reminder.
But your therapist didn't remind you of that explicitly.
No, he didn't do it by, well, remember this, Bob. Remember you've been here before, right? now. He was just actually talking to me about what's happening now. He was literally talking to me about what's happening now.
Between you and him.
Actually, yeah. He said to me, do you want to pay attention to not so much, I mean, we can talk about the fight if that's what you want, but do you want to pay attention to what's happening between us in our connection? And you know what? I realized I didn't want to be there. I didn't want to be in therapy. I didn't want to talk to him. I felt just ashamed. And telling him about that, I always tell everybody, tell your therapist. Well, actually, tell him. I do. I told him. Mm-hmm. It's like, this is what it's like to be in front of you right now. And it's from that my softer feelings emerged, not from any kind of...
Towards your wife as well.
Yeah.
So it accessed some, mode or...
Yeah, mode. I guess that's a good way to think about it.
And it's shifted your heart.
Yep. That's right. Yeah, that's right.
And as a consequence, your orientation towards Colleen changed.
Right.
Huh.
And then it didn't get worse.
Huh.
That was a hard day, but it didn't get worse.
Perhaps less isolated, Bob. I'm trying to encourage Bob to not be as isolated when he's suffering.
I texted
i.e. calling me.
Yeah.
Bob was suffering and he was texting me and I
And
was
then
like, okay, let's talk, let's talk today.
Right.
I'm off work in a couple hours or whatever. And then he didn't call. And I thought, well, he's probably busy, with other things. Yeah. This happened a few times over the past week. And then, when we talked today, you're just like, well, I think I was, all right, you said, you were isolating.
I was totally isolating.
It wasn't, you weren't doing anything else. You were just like turtling.
Yeah, turtling. Yeah.
And probably to more suffering, right? Although to reach out would also create its own suffering.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's, painful but no, it's, to more suffering. Yeah. Because when you and me talk, I get some relief from it.
Yeah.
And a bit of perspective, because it wants to take over and tell me this is how it is. Da, 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 da.
Yeah.
Right. And you're pretty matter of fact about that.
How so?
Oh, that's that thing you go through, Bob, essentially.
Yeah. I mean, for the record, that probably wouldn't be what I would say.
No, you don't say those words, and you would never be dismissive like that. But you have...
I wouldn't be like, you're right, Bob. She is a horrible person.
Yeah, right. No, you would never do that. But just because of, your willingness and your attention and your care about me, that has the possibility of emerging.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have a magical thought that somehow talking with me would have solved all your problems. But I don't know. To me, I'm like, if you're suffering, you might as well be with someone else.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, why be alone?
You wouldn't have tried to actually make it all better.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Well, you're welcome.
I know, right.
It didn't happen.
Yeah, right. Thanks for that thing that you didn't get a chance to do because I didn't follow through.
Well, you're thanking me for the intention, and
that's true.
You're welcome, because, you've been there for me and would have if I,
Oh, yeah.
So, and, I do this with Berto. Us men, and maybe just people in general, it's like, we can do things on our own. And it's like, what? So Berto and I have a lot of health anxieties. And so we resolved to, especially if we end up in the hospital, that we would call each other.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Because we've both had that experience and just like hunkered down and didn't reach out to anyone, And so maybe you and I can go on a pact like that. I mean, I don't know if you're interested in, like, when you're suffering, like, don't, as a policy, don't just hole up. And I mean, you can talk talk to anyone,
Sure,
me included, but don't
Right.
don't just do nothing, you know, and sit in your own pain, you know.
I think you're the person I'd be most likely to call.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I don't need you to call me. I'm
No,
available, of
it's
course.
not about-
You can call
right.
anyone. Just
Sure.
call someone.
Somebody.
That's the policy. Like
Understood. Yeah.
you gotta call someone, and if it's anyone, it could be me. Yeah. And
You're always home.
yeah. Especially these days.
Yeah.
And again, the listeners are like, wow, I really respect Bob. He's a genius. He's a therapist. You know, he knows what he's talking about. And he suffers too and shames himself into isolation, doesn't reach out. I mean, what are you always saying? Talk about it.
Talk about it.
And then when you're suffering, you self-destructively don't.
Yeah.
And that's normal. You know, for various reasons, shame, just wanting to forget about it, maybe.
Yeah. Mostly shame.
Okay.
Yeah.
Shame, like shame of what?
Like that you're gonna. I don't think you would judge me, but what is it? It's like it's just embarrassing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which I guess. No, I don't think that's the same as me thinking you're going to judge me. It's just embarrassing.
Yeah, it's embarrassing too. Because our society says that you're supposed to
yeah.
not fight as a couple, you know. But all couples fight. So, but it's interesting that you're not ashamed, because you told me, you just texted me.
I did.
Out of the blue a few times.
That's true.
So you're not ashamed to text me, but you are ashamed to talk to me.
Isn't that a thing? I mean, that's just artifice, but yeah.
Like, what's that about? Is it like less involved to text?
There's less contact.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To talk would be more involved.
Yeah.
Did you text other people? I'm just curious. You just texted me about it. Okay. That's interesting. That's good to know, because, I mean, I don't know if that's what will happen in the future, but I was wondering, I'm like, I wonder if he's texting others, because if he's texting others and talking to others, then I'll feel better for him.
Yeah.
But if he's only texting me and he's not talking with me or anyone, then I'm much more worried about him. So that was true.
Yeah, that was true.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It was a heck of a week.
Yeah. So we talked about it before we went on the air. We've sort of talked about it now. How do you feel now?
Oh, embarrassed. Hopeful that there's something in here that's useful to the person that wrote in, or maybe another listener. Looking forward to going home and having a beer with Colleen. Kind of missing her right now. Even though I just came from home.
Missing good time with her, relaxing time.
Yeah. And then, despite embarrassment, really appreciative of you and our friendship.
Yeah, good. I mean, I'll cry with you this time, Bob. But I love you, and it kills me that you're in pain. When you're in pain.
I love you too.
Yeah. I mean, it kills me because you're such a good person, and you didn't deserve what you went through when you were young. And that's why this is happening, you know?
Yeah.
And it just breaks my heart, you know? And because you've worked so hard with Colleen, and
true.
She's worked hard too.
Yeah, she has.
And you've looked a long time for her, you know, before you met her. And
that's true.
And it's just fucking tragedy that you would have weeks like that. It's so unfair.
It's funny the way you think about it, is having weeks like that. Like, it's just a flat road, and that's part of what you get when you drive that flat road. And I often think about it like it's like a mountain, and if I don't climb it, then I don't know. I'm not going to get anywhere.
You've had a lot of weeks like that.
Oh yeah, no, it's true.
I've known about some of them.
Yeah.
a minority of them, I'm guessing.
Yes.
And it's just so unfair,
Yeah.
you know. It's like, I wish that you could have like just a year
Oh, wow.
of none of those weeks,
Oh, geez.
you know,
Yeah.
just like a year of just like none of those weeks.
I'd like a weekend. That'd be all right. Good weekend.
Yeah. And, you know, to everyone out there who has those weeks,
Yeah.
we're with you.
I feel sad about that.
You know, and think about them. Like, some of them haven't even been to therapy before, or they don't have access to it. Or,
Right.
you know, they're still going to those wells and not getting anything. They're still terribly ashamed.
Mm-hmm. Maybe
And-
suffering alone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They don't have friends to talk to about it or something, you know. It's it's such a tragedy. And some people don't even know how they feel, right? Because they're so elementary about that, you know. They've never been allowed to explore their own feelings, so they don't even have the ability to articulate, you know, what's happening.
Right. Just a notion that something ain't right, or
Right. And or the midst of self-destruction of alcoholism or something,
yeah,
you know.
Right.
And yeah, it's just you know, if there is an afterlife and there is a just God, all y'all will have, you know, as a kid, I was told there was heaven, and there was this notion of like those who suffer get the most in heaven. Those who, you know, like Jesus suffered a lot, so he gets the most, or, you know.
Yeah.
And so for people like you, in my head, it's this golden city, and at the top of the hill is a series of very expensive mansions, and you get those mansions. And people like me live in the slums of heaven.
Oh my God.
Which
that
is
sounds
fine. I mean, it's still heaven.
Yeah.
But I didn't suffer as much as you did, and so you get more. That's the vision I had in my head
when you were a kid.
Yeah. So if there is a God, and there's an afterlife, and there is a just God, and heaven happens to be a golden city in the clouds, I'd like to think that you get a mansion on the hill.
Thanks. Did you ever hear that one about heaven and hell? Guy dies. I don't know this whole story. I'm going to get it wrong, but I'll probably botch it a bit, but it's pretty cool. And was being escorted down a hallway, and there's a door, and his escort says, "In there is hell. Go ahead, open it up, take a look." And there's a person in there alone with a spoon and a bowl of soup, and the spoon is like 10 feet long, and they can't get the soup to their mouth. And he says, "That's hell. Now that room over there, that's heaven. Go ahead, take a look in there." And there's two people in there, and they both have a spoon that's 10 feet long, and they're feeding one another. That's heaven. I like that.
Yeah. Yeah, such a different, just one little change.
One little change.
Changes the whole thing.
Yeah.
To a fun 10-foot spoon soup game.
Maybe when you show up in heaven, they give you a 10-foot spoon, and you get to walk down the hall and pick your room or something.
Yeah. So call me next time.
I'll call you next time.
All right. That does it for that episode. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself, because
You deserve it.